It's a great pleasure to be here. Basically, the first official opening, the first day of the summer university. Yesterday it was just a little colloque, little chat, which was quite interesting and intense. And then we had a nice concert and the reception. And sometimes I had the feeling now people felt so well. They go home then. They heard everything, everyone. And I wonder, is anyone coming today in the morning when it looks like? So thank you for being here. And I think an intense, real working week is going to start. I'm very glad to see here all of our partners, representatives. First of all, and above all, the mayor of Kőszeg, Béla Básthy, who is a long-term ally, a friend, I always say that a former student, and really a wonderful supporter, and a representative of our institute. I remember that moment. We should publish this beautiful photo when Lira Luli, who was part of the scoping committee, formulated this study, the summary of Kőszeg and iASK's achievement, which is the underlying document for the cooperation between iASK and the United Nations University. And then this document was approved by the Hungarian government and by the United Nations University last June. And last year, November, it was November or December, there was a parliamentary debate and a voting about it. And so we were invited, Mr. Mayor, Béla Básthy, and Lira Luli, myself, and Professor Bogardi and Andor Nagy. And we had a chance to watch how Hungarian representatives react. So there were speeches, actually, pro-Kőszeg. And I was wondering if anyone would say anything negative. A big surprise, nothing negative was said. In fact, the parliament voted 93% for the establishment of a new UNU institute in Kőszeg, which takes time. They're working on it, but this process certainly started, and this has become a law. You can read this in English and in Hungarian in the official Hungarian Gazette, the Hungarian Review. Okay, so this is a long introduction. I would like to ask Béla to give his words about the 31st Summer University.
I'm not used yet to say 31st. It was always beginning with 20. So something interesting happened in last years. So welcome to Kőszeg, everybody. If you allow, I will a little bit read, and at the end, maybe one or two sentences free. So I warmly welcome the participants of the 31st International Summer University to Kőszeg. The topics of the Summer University, the issues of autonomy and political community, are always, but today especially relevant. We can see many signs and imprints of this not only in the history of our continent, Europe, but also in the history of small towns like Kőszeg. While every settlement, country, or continent likes to think of itself as the center of the world, in reality, the periphery, the border region, the exposure to many influences is accurate for much larger areas than the proximity to the center. For example, our city is historically located in the territory of the Kingdom of Hungary. Yet throughout its history, it often had to pay more attention to Vienna than to Budapest. I wish the participants of the Summer University that Kőszeg will be a place of freedom of thought for you in these days, far and a little hidden from busy centers. May your ideas be freed from daily constraints, allowing you to discover new alternatives, innovative solutions, and greater room for development. We are proud of this summer university, where small Kőszeg has been a laboratory of fresh and innovative ideas for 31 years at the beginning of each summer. I wish the organizers and the participants to feel at home in Kőszeg this year as well. Thank you for visiting us, and come and look how we live in Kőszeg. So I have to transmit an invitation to the town hall. We will fix a date. I hope we find one date for it, because maybe you know or may not, the eldest town hall of Kőszeg is located of Hungary is located in Kőszeg, and I think it's interesting to visit. So if you find somewhere after lunch or somehow 20 minutes to visit me at the town hall, I can maybe show a little bit more and tell some stories about Kőszeg. So enjoy your stay and reach your goals with the summer university. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are in the process of establishing a new institute in Kőszeg, naturally, and it's a must. Our major partner in Hungary is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which after April 12 went through a fundamental change in many ways, according to its vision, its doctrines, its applications to Europe and to the world. As you have heard yesterday, the message from Christian Mészáros, which was interpreted by the head of the department from the foreign ministry, and now our actually colleague and friend, who used to be Her Excellency Klára Breyer, the ambassador of Hungary in Finland, was invited back by the foreign minister, her old colleague, Anita Orbán, to be one of the strongest ally and friend within the new ministry structure, namely the minister responsible for bilateral relations. So if anything new happens between Hungary and the United States, or Hungary and Great Britain, or Germany and Hungary, it will be in the hands of Klára Breyer. So she's a wonderful intellectual, and she participated in the last couple of years in many of our endeavors and conferences, and is very, very enthusiastic about Kőszeg. So in her new position, she wanted to come and talk about it, but thanks to the very busy schedule of the new Hungarian government, she was told that she has to organize what we call the new V4 cooperation, which is going to happen the first meeting in Budapest tomorrow. So for that reason, she did send us a message. I hope I think it's a very strong message, and I asked Jody Jensen to read it for you.
Well, I'm very privileged to be able to speak for the State Secretary, but I know that it's only because of my native English capacity here, not because I deserve it. So I will read what she wrote. Dear Professor Myslivets, dear organizers and participants of the 31st International Summer University, allow me to apologize at the outset for not being with you this time. I am very sorry that, contrary to my plans, unforeseen official engagements prevent me from visiting Kőszeg during this important event. I follow iASK's activities with great interest because I believe that a truly valuable intellectual center is operating in Kőszeg, and it has now become an important part of a significant intellectual network. If one takes a look at the topics and the lineup of speakers for this week's program, it becomes clear that once again there will be important lectures and discussions. The value of looking at topics from different angles and with interdisciplinary approach cannot be overestimated. In today's world, Europe's strategic autonomy is just as important an issue as the question of what kind of cultural world we pass on to future generations. The importance of universities, intellectual centers, knowledge hubs, where genuine knowledge is created and passed over, must be emphasized at a time when misinformation and the formation of quick but superficial opinions are gaining excessive ground. All those who take their work as educators and researchers seriously, become mentors of new generations, are standing up against these trends. Thank you all for your dedication. As the State Secretary for Bilateral Relations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I particularly appreciate that our country will be able to establish a UNU research institute based in Kőszeg, thanks to the great performance of iASK over several decades. Becoming part of the UNU network is not only an honor for Hungary, but also a great opportunity. For my part, I will work to support this project as much as possible, so that by joining forces, we can achieve success. With these thoughts, I would like to wish you fruitful encounters, discussions, friendly debates that will generate new knowledge and will undoubtedly foster many new human connections. I wish you a successful 31st Summer University. Sincerely yours, Clara Breuer.
Okay, and I guess we start our panel. Supposed to have a chair here, I think. Yeah, I think, yes. Lira is the chair. Please, Lira, take your microphone.
Yes, thank you. Good morning to everyone. It's really nice to see these fresh morning faces, and I hope you had a good morning coffee and you are able to embrace this discussion, which is complex and multi-layer. We are back at where we left yesterday, strategic autonomy. What does strategic autonomy mean for Europe now? Actually, we are 3 years on after President Macron launched this concept, and it has yet to materialize. Some experts say it is just a strategic awakening what we are witnessing right now. But this panel will try to explore about Europe's role in these hard geopolitical conditions and circumstances. The session will examine Europe's posturing in a rapidly changing global environment marked by shifting power dynamics, technological competition, and renewed geopolitical tensions. I'm happy to chair this panel with excellent distinguished figures, excellent analysts and experts, and I'm going to reveal their names one by one and their bias. They will explore what strategic autonomy means in practice across many areas: defense, technology, energy security, and whether Europe has the institutional capacity to act decisively in these precarious times. The discussion will also address the evolving transatlantic relationship and implication for European security and NATO's and Europeans' role in NATO. So I'm sure that distinguished panelists will pursue interesting lines of arguments and explain what it means for Europe to navigate this zero-sum game politics while also trying to preserve a positive-sum regional order. So my pleasure is to introduce the first speaker, Ambassador István Gyarmati. He will be online for sure. No, he's here. Oh, okay. Because we have some panelists online too. Yeah. He's one of Hungary's most distinguished diplomats and security policy expert, currently serving as Secretary General of Hungarian Atlantic Council. Throughout a remarkable career in diplomacy and defense, he played a key role in Hungary's democratic transition, including negotiations on the withdrawal of Soviet troops and the country's Euro-Atlantic integration. So considering his expertise, I'm sure Ambassador Gyarmati will tell us more about how Europe is preparing for a world that does not rely too much anymore on its traditional ally, the US, and about the burden sharing within NATO. The floor is yours, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. When we go to a conference which is talking about Europe, it is usually starts when people are educated. They start with Mark Antony, telling that I came to lay Caesar to rest, not to praise. I do the opposite of it. I came here to praise Europe, not to lay it to rest. Because I think we are suffering a collective inferiority complex in Europe. We cannot be proud of ourselves because we look at the United States and we look at China and we say that they are much better and we have no chance. The best that is said about Europe many times is that Europe is a wonderful, beautiful museum. And I want to share with you my thoughts why it is not true. I think the opposite is true. First of all, my first question is, and then I go into some detail, ask people all over the world, from the Kremlin to the pumps of Argentina, where do you want to live? Where do you send your daughters and sons to study and to learn? Do you send them to Moscow? Eventually to Shanghai? Sometimes to Boston, okay? Where do you want to live? What is the most pleasant place to live? And I want to share with you my thoughts that I think it's Europe, still. And why it is very important to keep Europe more or less as it is, not Americanize, not make it Chinese, let alone Russian. So what is the problem with Europe? We say that Europe is lagging behind China and the United States. What does it mean? That, in a positive way, that we are the third biggest economy in the world, the European Union. Is it so bad to be the third? Why are we lagging behind? Where are we lagging behind? The total GDP, yes, we are lagging behind China. But the GDP per capita, which is most important for the life of the people, we are not lagging behind China. We are lagging behind a little the United States, but not much. In terms of productivity, we say that Europe is old and we're lagging behind the Americans. Yes, we are lagging behind 18%. Productivity in Europe is 18% lower than in the United States. Why? And I always try to teach my students that the why question is the most important. So why? 2004, it was 10% for the European Union. Now it is 18. We in Hungary should not blame Europe too much for 18%, because it's the new members who added the plus 8%. And it's understandable. The problem starts if and when the new members don't start catching up. And we don't really. But I think we have the chance, and that's the purpose of the European Union, to make the new members, so to say, new members catching up with the old ones. But let's have a look at the 10% of the old ones. Netherlands, Germany, France, 10%. And there is an interesting, if you go into some detail, there is an interesting detail. The productivity of Europe per hour is almost the same. The productivity by GDP is 10% less. Why? Because we are spending more for healthcare, we are spending more for social expenses, etc. So, do you want to give up healthcare Do you want to give up your 5 or 4 weeks vacation for 5 days? Do you want to give up your maternity leave for this 10%? And I think no. I think we should be happy with the 10% and a better life. So we have no reason to have this inferiority complex, but we are guilty of it ourselves because for some reason, historic reasons, we Hungarians are of course very proud that we are always pessimists. But in terms, Europe is more or less pessimistic as well. Maybe history is the reason. There is one area which I want to go into some detail because it's being mentioned very frequently, and it's really very important. And last but not least, because that is the area where I really think I know things. It is the security military balance in Europe. And people say that, oh, Europe is dependent on America, that Europe cannot defend itself without America, that America spends more for defense than European countries altogether. All of it's true, but let's start with military spending. Yes, America's military spending, $1 trillion actually, just for your information, is more than European spending. But what does it have to do with European defense? Look at the map and you will see 704 American bases outside Europe and outside America. You will see 11 aircraft carrier groups, out of which it's only one that is in Europe, in the Mediterranean. You will see 35,000 American soldiers in Europe and hundreds of thousands outside Europe. So how much is it that America spends for European defense? It's not 1 trillion. We have made a calculation that shows, it's a very precise calculation, tank by tank, $100 billion. This is what the Americans spend for European defense. It's not more than what Europe does. So why do we believe this propaganda? Because we have an inferiority complex and we accept the American aggressive American policy. And this did not start with Donald Trump, don't believe. It started with, I think, George Washington. But in NATO today, it started with Obama. People love Obama, but that's where it started. Now, what does it mean? Does it mean that we have done enough for our defense, for our security? By far not. But the reason is not that we spend much less than the Americans. We spend much less than necessary. By the way, I think we should give up comparing ourselves all the time to somebody who is better. It is like Hungarian football, that we compare our football team to the football team of Cameroon rather than Germany, and then we play with Cameroon and win, and then we are very happy. So football is like politics. You have to choose the right enemy, and then you win. Anyway, so what is the situation? I can tell you, and if I get another hour, I will give you some detailed analysis that Europe is able and ready to defend itself. Against whom? Against Russia. There is no other threat to Europe, no other military threat to Europe. So is Russia such a formidable enemy? It is. You see the proof in Ukraine. Russia, that has never been defeated by, as according to Mr. Putin, cannot win the war in Ukraine. Actually, they have lost the war already because they were unable to achieve anything of the original objectives. Their big strategic objective is now 5,000 square kilometers of Ukraine. That's what they are fighting for. So But Russia is a formidable enemy, not only for nuclear weapons. Of course, nuclear weapons can be very important, but what we know is more or less, and that's what we think in the strategic community, that nuclear weapons are useful as long as you don't use them. As soon as you start using them, they lose their usefulness and become kind of counterproductive, I would say, at least. So we can defend ourselves, not only because Russia is weak now, but also because we are strong. And we began making the right moves. I don't want to go into the details. I just give you one example how, and it is news from yesterday actually, how important it is that Europe is waking up. I believe that if there is a Russian, my first point is there is no danger that Russia will launch an all-over attack against Europe, because they know they would lose immediately. The Polish army is stronger than half of the Russian army, because they are ready. And Ukraine, I mean, it's a really miracle what the Ukrainians have performed. Ukraine is becoming the Israel of Europe in terms of weapons development and production. So, what is the danger? The danger is that one Russian might miscalculate the situation and start, okay, we captured Crimea, which they might lose in the next weeks or months. So, okay, we captured Crimea, we captured 18% of the territory of Ukraine without having to fight against serious enemies like NATO. Why don't we try the same thing? I tell you the story of the Crimea. When the Crimea was started to be invaded by the little green men, as the Russians were called that time, without a uniform, soldiers without a uniform, the Ukrainian army had its strongest brigade in the Crimea, strongest Marines. And the commander of the brigade sent a message home to Kiev, telling that the Russians are coming and we need to fight. And he said, I'm ready to fight and I'm able to fight. And the general analysis shows that if they had, they would have won. Russia against this brigade could never have defeated the Ukrainians. So the whole war could have been prevented. What happened in Kiev? Kiev was full of traitors, and Kiev was full of bad advisors. The traitors, of course, wanted the Russians to defeat Ukrainians or to capture Kiev. So they did really things that are unimaginable. For instance, the parts of the Ukrainian army under the command of these traitors removed the landmines that were put on the roads to the Crimea in order to make the way free for the Russians. The rest couldn't decide, so they turned to the advisors, the British, the Americans, first of all, and they told that, well, I think it was in the best spirit of Neville Chamberlain, that, okay, don't fight the Russians. We don't want to risk a war for the Crimea. So they did not. They withdrew that brigade. And we see the consequences. Now we have a situation, and there are a few places, Transnistria, the Slovakia corridor, and give you the example of Narva. For two reasons. I think this is the most plausible, and secondly, because I was there 2 weeks ago and I saw what's going on there. Narva is a little city in Estonia at the Narva River. The Narva River cuts through Estonia, so east of the Narva River, it's mostly Russian populated, and it's a plain field. It's to the border to Russia, and the scenario that we are afraid of is that the Russian people of Narva, meaning the Russians who come from Russia, sent by Mr. Putin, that they declare the People's Republic of Narva, as they did in Luhansk and in Donetsk. And then the Russian green men appear and they take control over this territory. This is very similar to what happened in Ukraine. The difference being that Estonia is a member of NATO. So why it is dangerous? It is dangerous because several members of NATO, led by the American president, have questioned the usefulness of NATO. They have questioned that NATO would react to such actions. They questioned that the Americans would be part of it. And therefore, the danger is that Putin starts believing that NATO is not able and not ready. And therefore, he could venture this small attack against Estonia. If there is no response, Putin won. And then the next will be the Slovakia corridor or Poland or Romania. So we have to fight immediately when it happens. The good news is actually that NATO started to prepare for this contingency. And it's not only the Estonian army, but that's what I mentioned from yesterday, that a German brigade was deployed to Lithuania, close to Estonia, and they are ready to fight. They are, we can tell if a brigade is ready to fight or not. We look at the brigade, they are ready to fight. So if the Russians try something in Narva, there is a German brigade. In the next months, a British brigade will follow. So we are ready, and hopefully also able. We will see in Ankara, in the NATO summit, how much NATO is ready. We have a difficulty with the American president, but last week he agreed at the G7 meeting to a very good declaration, actually, which is actually what we really needed. I just really hope that he doesn't have the time to have a phone conversation with Putin in the meantime. If he doesn't, then I think this declaration will stand also in Ankara. So I think we have no reason to be very pessimistic about Europe. There are a lot of problems, economic problems. There is the rising of the radical right, which is also our mistake because we let them address issues and so to say privatize major issues that the mainstream politicians are not ready and not able to address. So there are dangers. But Europe is not a museum. Europe is the third powerful nation, European Union, third powerful economic power in the world. We are able and ready to defend ourselves. We also had a study we made with NATO that shows that we should not be afraid of Donald Trump. We have to talk to him, and we have to be able and ready to say no if necessary. Donald Trump threatens to withdraw 5,000 soldiers from Germany out of the 35. I had a meeting with the Assistant Secretary of Defense a month ago, and I told him that it's very good. I mean, why do you stop? Withdraw 20,000. Because we don't need more than 15,000. But we need the right 15,000 Americans who deal with intelligence, target acquisition, etc., communication, etc. We don't need American tanks. We don't need American boots on the ground. So we can make a European autonomy, strategic autonomy, come back to the title of this event. We can create an European strategic autonomy in terms of military as well, because economically we are already there in the European Union. We can do it militarily as well, and we are able to do it in such a way that it works and makes Donald Trump happy, which is almost impossible, but it's not impossible. We can do this. It needs some determination, quite some money, of course, but we have agreed to 3.5% of our GDP to spend for defense. So I think we are on the right way. A lot of problems, a lot of challenges. Next year's elections in France might challenge this picture, but I'm pretty sure that Mr. Bardella is not stupid. We are always talking about the Melonization of Mr. Bardella, and I think that would be a very good sign. Meloni is, I think, the only really statesman, or how to say it, statesperson in the world, so in Europe. So I think we have no reason to be afraid of the future. Let me tell you a story. It's not a joke, it really happened. In conclusion, why I think Meloni is the Italian Prime Minister is the only one who is too close to be a statesman. Apart from that, she is not a man, but the story is about Twiggy. I mean, there are a few in this audience who are close to my age, and I told this is my last story, so close to my age. And remember Twiggy, the fashion model. Twiggy was coming from a very poor East End family, and she was nevertheless campaigning for Maggie Thatcher. And when she was asked why she is campaigning, coming from a poor family, for Margaret Thatcher, her answer was, because she is the only man.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for this thoughtful talk and also providing this positive perspective for Europe's autonomy. Strategic autonomy. Now we have to move on with the next speaker, but before introducing him, I would like to say that we have assigned 10 minutes for each speaker in order to leave some room for some questions and answers after these discussions. Our next speaker is Péter Zachar. He's a Hungarian historian and associate professor serving as vice dean for international affairs at Faculty of Public Governance and International Studies of Ludovika University of Public Service, Budapest. He is also head of Department of International Relations and Diplomacy. His research focuses on history of international relations and public administration in Central Europe. So please, Professor Zachar, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, dear colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a profound privilege to be here today with you and talk here in Kőszeg at the Institute of Advanced Studies, an institution that has long served as a vital intellectual sanctuary for analyzing the structural transformations of our global order. Ambassador Gyarmati emphasized a very positive picture and praised Europe. He stated that Europe is waking up and is ready to defend itself. I would like to play the bad guy and tell you why and in which special fields we are still not ready enough. For my most important message would be that we are living through a profound strategic interregnum, and I would like to tell you why. For over 8 decades, Europe's security architecture rested upon a binary arrangement. The United States guaranteed territorial deterrence through its unquestioned hegemony within NATO, while the European project channeled its creative energies into economic integration, regulatory expansion, and the construction of a single market. Today, this foundational division of labor is not merely under strain, it has fundamentally collapsed. The transatlantic relationship is undergoing a structural realignment, forcing us to confront a decisive question. Will Europe emerge as a sovereign, self-reliant security actor, or will it remain a vulnerable geopolitical spectator in an increasingly adversarial multipolar world? Rather than speaking in broad generalities, I wish to reflect on a specific segment of strategic autonomy, the critical nexus of technological sovereignty and state resilience. This focus is directly shaped by my institution, Ludovika University of Public Service in Budapest. As Hungary's dedicated state-building university, we analyze strategic autonomy not as a slogan, but as an operational state capacity. To understand the crossroads at which we stand, we must look directly at the stark signals coming in the last days from Brussels and Washington. Just days ago, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced a sweeping 6-month review of the American force posture in Europe, a framework explicitly termed NATO 3.0. This is not the familiar, cyclical, burden-sharing rhetoric of the past US administrations. It represents a fundamental operational and doctrinal realignment. Professor Gyarmati made some notes on the numbers of US forces, but we see that we're witnessing the deliberate dismantling of the multilateral world order with this step of the Americans. Under the banner of America First and the transactional common sense realism, the United States is abandoning the post-Cold War cooperative security framework in favor of a raw, multipolar oligopoly of power. In this new paradigm, international law and multilateral treaties are no longer viewed as foundational constraints, but as obsolete structures or ad hoc instruments of convenience. Consequently, the European Union is increasingly characterized in Washington's strategic documents not as a cherished ally, but as a set of problems, even as a strategic competitor, whose transnational institutions and liberal political trajectories run counter to American transactional realism. Under the guise of confronting what Washington terms free riding, the United States is executing a significant drawdown of its conventional capabilities on the European continent. The intelligence projections we are analyzing are sobering. Washington plans to reduce its strategic bomber presence in the European theater by 30%, entirely withdraw its high-end reconnaissance and strike drone fleets, cut its naval commitments more than by a half, and reduce its fighter aircraft deployments by a third. This systematic retrenchment confronts Europe with a sudden, painful reality check. The conventional shield under which we integrated our economies is being dismantled. The capabilities being withdrawn are precisely the high-end collective assets that Europe has structurally failed to develop on its own. Our primary internal projects designed to generate these strategic enablers remain paralyzed by industrial rivalries and strategic divergence. This is starkly illustrated by the recent high-profile collapse of our flagship cooperative programs. France and Germany reluctantly decided to abandon the joint fighter jet component of the future combat air system due to corporate disputes over intellectual property and specific military requirements. While the main ground combat system tank project is nearly a decade behind this schedule, forcing unilateral intermediate stopgates like France's Capint main battle tank and Germany's parallel Leopard 3 development. These bilateral setbacks reveal a deeper systematic truth. Ad hoc intergovernmental agreements are structurally incapable of carrying the weight of European rearmament. If Europe is to survive this transition, we must expect far more from the supranational community level component of our integration. It is no longer about states cooperating, it is about the Union leading in this very special field. How does Europe finance and deliver this shift towards a highly integrated community-led capability generation? The policy response has begun to crystallize, representing a dramatic departure from post-war macroeconomic orthodoxy that was characterized especially by Germany. This is precisely where the community's financial and industrial machinery steps in to build the necessary critical mass. At the NATO summit in Den Haag, allies committed to a historic target, already mentioned here, moving towards the 5% of GDP in security and defense-related spending by 2035, from which 3.5% of the GDP is to be strictly earmarked for core military requirements, and another 1.5% must be dedicated to critical related infrastructure, and especially cybersecurity. Simultaneously, the European Commission's flagship framework, initially conceived as Rearm Europe and now operationalized as Readiness 2030, aims to mobilize up to 800 billion euros in additional defense-related investments by the end of the decade. However, as the landmarks report, for example, by Mario Draghi, as you well have known, have recently warned, throwing capital at the problem is at the moment insufficient. The core bottleneck of European defense is not fundamentally a budgetary one, but a question of raw production capacity. While Europe is macroeconomically capable of allocating higher shares of its GDP to defense, it still structurally lacks the industrial capacity to manufacture ammunition, missiles, and air defense systems at scale. In short term, our reliance on American military capabilities remains an unavoidable reality. Without a decisive industrial mobilization, strategic autonomy will remain nothing more than an empty political slogan. Let me add one more important thought. In the 21st century, defense capability can no longer be decoupled from technological sovereignty. And the European Union currently suffers from critical, systematic capacity deficits in the very fields that define modern warfare. In artificial intelligence, Europe lacks the consolidated computing infrastructure and sovereign military-grade algorithmic frameworks required to compete globally, leaving our defense systems dangerously dependent on foreign models. In AI, we lack specifically for rapid automated command and control decision support in the European Union. In the space domain, Europe possesses virtually no independent military-grade geospatial intelligence or autonomous space situational awareness. In a high-intensity crisis, this stark deficit renders our operational planning and military command strategically blind without US satellite constellations. In cyber defense, we still have problems to protect critical infrastructure, build resilient networks, and develop credible, active deterrence against persistent hybrid aggression. Our lack of genuine technological self-reliance is a profound vulnerability that money alone cannot immediately resolve. At Ludovika University of Public Service, we have placed these three pillars at the center of our research and training, treating them not as isolated technical challenges, but as deeply interconnected instruments of national and European resilience. To navigate this strategic crossroads without becoming paralyzed by institutional inertia, Europe must enable coalitions of the willing to drive capability development forward. By leveraging frameworks like Permanent Structured Cooperation, the PESCO, and European Defense Projects of Common Interest, the EDPCIS, we can operationalize key joint initiatives such as the European Air Shield or the European Space Shield. This flexible integration must extend beyond EU borders to encompass key non-EU partners, particularly the United Kingdom or Turkey, as we call. The same applies contingent upon a comprehensive peace agreement that formally establishes recognized state borders, secures territorial integrity, and guarantees peaceful coexistence with its neighbors for a stabilized Ukraine. Crucial, this pursuit of strategic autonomy must never be misconstrued as a bid for European isolation. The United States remain the indispensable anchor of European territorial defense through its nuclear umbrella. We still can decide whether to use the French for this one. Our goal is not to decouple from NATO, but to transform Europe from a structural dependency into a capable, self-reliant pillar within the Transatlantic Alliance. The era of European free riding is over, dismantled by the geopolitical pressures of NATO 3.0 and the resurgent multipolar reality. The luxury of hesitation has been stripped away. If we fail to pool our sovereignty, consolidate our defense industries, and secure our technological baselines, Europe will slide into geopolitical obsolescence, becoming a passive playground for the strategic ambitions of external powers. Our ultimate challenge is not one of financial capital, but of political will, governance, and collective imagination. In this resurgent age of raw power politics, Europe must choose. We must decide whether to be a rule maker or a rule taker. Building a cohesive, strategically autonomous Europe is the only path to ensuring we remain the former one. And yes, Europe is not a museum, but is still not a full-fledged global player in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Zachar, for your speech. You provided a very realistic, dramatic picture of what are the urgencies of actions that lie ahead of Europe right now. But I'm sure Ambassador Brix, Emil Brix, has this difficult task to find a middle ground between these opposing perspectives, a positive one and a more dramatic one. So it's my pleasure to invite Ambassador Emil Brix, a distinguished Austrian diplomat, historian, and president of the Austrian Research Association. He has served as an Austrian ambassador to both the United Kingdom and Russia, and as director of the Diplomatic Academy Vienna for nearly a decade. So he brings a unique perspective on European diplomacy, transatlantic relations, and the evolving geopolitical space. And I'm sure he will tell us more about how Europe can exploit its potential right now in the strategic, social, normative, but also cultural realm. But at the same time, what are the limitations right now? So please, Ambassador Brix, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction and welcome from my side. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you in person. You raised the expectations because you called me an Austrian who should moderate between the two positions we already heard this morning, maybe because of Austrian neutrality. It's difficult for me, but you are absolutely right. There is an Austrian saying that Europe is always as close to the collective inferiority complex as to a superiority complex. And that's true. And this was said by Karl Kraus about Austria, by the way. And what it meant was really that we are not realistic enough. So I will spend my 10 minutes speaking a little bit about how Europe can be realistic. And the question is, does Europe have a choice in all of this? The title of the summer university is Europe's Choice. I don't believe, point number one, that Europe has a choice. When I listened to Ambassador Gyarmati, I had the feeling that actually things are doing all right as far as security and the military defense is concerned, because NATO is still there. The Russians didn't even succeed to overcome the army in Ukraine. We can rely on all the obligations of NATO. But when I listened to the second speaker, I got a totally different idea. I got the idea that we have to do much more, that we are not ready, that we cannot rely mainly on our US partners in all of this. And actually, I would say, if that leaves you puzzled, that's the problem that we have with strategic autonomy. Both sides are right. There are possibilities for strategic autonomy, but we have to look into the individual fields we are talking about. Security, economy, defense, intellectual innovations, and so on. When I was ambassador to Russia, the EU ambassadors had regular meetings with Foreign Minister Lavrov. And we talked about the advantages and the positions of the European Union. And Mr. Lavrov always said, "What's the European Union? Please tell me, what does it mean, European Union? I am interested to have a partner where I can see where the power lies and how I have to react." So that's why I understand the United States of America, but I don't understand the European Union. And actually, he didn't want to talk to the European Union, really. He did want to talk to Germany and France and others, but not to the European Union for many good reasons. When I listened in the last few months about strategic autonomy in a more concrete terms on the European side, I wondered. There were two main ideas, actually. There was the idea of Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, who said the next world order will be developed in Europe, by Europe, in Europe, for Europe. Well, sounds very nice. The idea of if the middle powers, the Western middle powers work together, they can convince the rest of it, and even if it doesn't work with the United Nations Security Council, they will develop a world order which will be regulated by nice rules. But then, actually, last week, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, a European, Kristalina Georgieva, had a very I think, a very important sentence. She said, Europe is a lifestyle superpower. She was asked about the role and power of Europe. And she said, Europe is only a lifestyle superpower. And it was already mentioned that Europe spends a lot on social public expenditure. Europe spends a lot on giving time on vacations to people. It spends a lot on healthcare and so on. And so that is true. When you look, and I think this is important for understanding what we are talking about, when you look into the public expenditure of the big powers on social affairs, in the European context, it's about 1/3 of GDP. 1/3 of GDP is spent on public social expenditure. It's a bit different between member states, but overall. Most of it, actually, the highest number is in France. When you look into other superpowers, China between 10 to 12%, Russia between 10 and 12%, the US, the figures differ, between 15 and 20%, India maybe about 10%. So there is a huge difference, a huge difference. So that's why I fully understand when Ms. Georgieva calls us a lifestyle superpower. Can we afford this situation? Obviously, not so much. And that's why I say Europe doesn't have a choice. The domestic problems in Europe with radical parties is a consequence of us Europeans not being able to convince majorities of people that it's worth to use so much public money on social affairs. And now we still additionally have the problem of the defense industry. So we have to make sure that there is a balance between what we spend in public affairs in comparison with other superpowers in the world. It doesn't work any other way. And it was actually Henry Kissinger who famously all the time said, a world order is based on two pillars only. The first pillar is rules. There must be rules in a world order. And a balance of powers, the second pillar, a balance of powers which can enforce these rules, Actually, in both of these pillars, we have a problem at the moment. And Europe is trying to fight against the end of the liberal multilateral system and the rules-based order, and it's maybe trying to become one of those who can enforce a balance of power that we live in. But this is what my main message here would be: can the EU react to these changes, dramatic changes that we have in the world order, and how should it react? I would like to compare it to how we live with climate change in the global order. We have two strategies in the world. One is to mitigate, and the other one is to fight against temperature rise. And my feeling is, so far, the European Union is defensive on this sort of issues. We at the moment try to defend the liberal order that we profited from and that we would love to sustain. But we are not ready to mitigate. We are not ready to mitigate and to adapt to a different situation, to a totally changing situation. And that's why my keyword is for Europe. Let's become real about empire building. That's an ugly word, empire, especially in the European context. We call it an ugly word. And the last years, I tried this word empire building for the European Union in Austrian audiences in lectures. Nobody liked it, really. Nobody liked it. You see how difficult this will become actually to transform policymaking and the objectives of the European Union. Because, at least in the Austrian context, everybody thought not so much about the colonial past. In Central Europe, we do not have so much colonial past, but they thought about the Third Reich and the German Empire and all these sort of things of empire building. But I think we have to accept that without empire building, there is no strategic autonomy. First, accept our new multipolarity, and there we have elements like the Finnish president Alexander Stubb. When you read his latest book, you find that he has become a realist. He said diplomacy starts not with illusions, but with understanding what's really happening on the ground. The second thing is we have to accept the transactional foreign policy. It's not helpful to complain about what Mr. Trump is doing all the time. And it's not helpful, by the way, to bow to the earth to Mr. Trump and to make sure that he accepts our pleasures and of accepting his power. Accept transactional foreign policy means we have to understand where we are strong, and we have to try to tell the others, here we are strong, and we intend to use the power that we have in this. So that is a more realistic strategy we need for strategic autonomy. And for this, and I'm coming to the end here, Rory, it's not only about foreign policy. It's also about, and this is of utmost importance, we have to create a real internal market in the European Union, a real internal market. We don't have it. We call it an internal market in the European Union, but it's not only not finished, but the major elements, capital market, digital internal market, is not there. And there is no majority at the moment which is ready to do this. We mentioned already the Draghi report and the Letta report, which are demanding all these things. You know how the member countries reacted? Most of them said yes, and then they put it into the drawer in the next desk. They didn't do much about that. So without this, there's no way to reach a strategic autonomy because it means that the interdependencies and the weaponization of economic relations will not decrease, but increase as far as. So create a full internal market. Secondly, that was already talked about. Yes, common defense, I fully agree, is in Europe possible without the United States, but there is still nuclear deterrence where I can't see in the coming years any alternative to the US involvement there. And the last point is, normally we say, we are so proud in the European Union that we have our norms and regulations, which are the best in the world. AI acts and trade rules and all that, and we are strong. Yes, but we only talk about whether these norms and regulations are attractive for us, for Europeans. But actually what we should ask is, are they attractive for others? For other powers, and only if our norms and rules are attractive for other powers to take part in it, then we will be successful and can talk about strategic autonomy. If we want to achieve this, we have to have rules and regulations which are not only attractive for member states of the European Union, but for other global players that we have here. I think I should stop here because the main problem, I have no answer. The main problem in achieving what I talked about strategic autonomy is that strategic autonomy necessarily needs more centralization. No exception in the history, the world history, at least in the European history. Strategic autonomy necessarily needs more centralization of power. And are we ready in the European Union? And do we have the ways to centralize power? No. And that's why only if we can overcome this and turn the European project, we want to turn it into something which is has an autonomy. It will only be possible to talk again about what sovereignty means and maybe to talk about whether the better project for strategic autonomy is the Holy Roman Empire, where you had no centralization, more or less, or the better project is the empire building in the 19th and 20th century. Maybe it's up for discussion where we are. So I think I am at least thankful for the first two panelists because they cleared the ground for my realistic perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your constructive speech. As we understood, Europe is not becoming more geopolitical, but it's assuming somehow more defensive roles in these geopolitical turmoils and difficult conditions. Now we have the next speakers. My pleasure is to introduce Professor Dr. Gábor Kardos, a leading Hungarian expert in international law and professor at Eötvös Lorand University. His academic work and international experience, including engagement with Council of Europe and human rights research initiatives, provide important perspectives on the role of law in today's changing international environment. He gave a very interesting speech here at iASK 2 weeks ago about the distinction between world order, international law, and the efforts to explain how law functions even under repeated violations. I would like to know from his perspective how Europe can navigate between this legal universalism, the role as a regulator, and geopolitical necessity to act more pragmatically through strategic calculations. So my pleasure to give you the floor for this talk, for this discussion. Please, the microphone. You should adjust the microphone. Switch on the microphone, please.
So thank you very much for the introduction, your kind introduction. It's my pleasure and honor to participate in this very sophisticated dialogue on the future of Europe and the concept of strategic autonomy. Well, my first issue I would like to raise is a very simple one. When we are talking about Europe, what does it mean? I mean, Europe is equal with European Union, or we have a different thing, which is also Europe. And sometimes it's a disturbing factor because we don't know whether we are talking about Europe as a distinct concept from European Union or the European Union itself. The other important thing I would like to raise, it's not new at all, but I think it comes back again and again, that although, as we have heard, Europe has many advantages in the field of social services, health service, and environmental protection, there is a big disadvantage, a structural disadvantage, or we could say that the US and China have a big advantage. That's the single leadership. Europe doesn't have anything like a single leadership. Even inside the European Union, there is the great division. And, I got the impression that when we are talking about Europe and the high achievements in the above-mentioned soft fields, we are always keeping in mind the western part of Europe. Because there are big differences in the health protection or social services between the old member states and the not so old member states of Central and Eastern Europe. And there is a problem which is closely related to the single leadership issue, that at present, at least, I got that impression that there are serious problems with the leadership inside the Union and having a vision of future of the integration. Well, I think the good time for the integration was when there was a common understanding between the two major European powers, Germany and France. And now we are lacking this common understanding. And Germany itself, at least the impression is that its economy is shrinking, and there are serious debates inside how to proceed with the European project. So we should take into consideration that Europe is a funny business, if you wish, and we should pay attention to the above-mentioned issues. The next problem I would like to raise is the capacity of Europe to defend itself. When I remember, and I think I have mentioned in my presentation, that before, I think in 2021, or yes, in 2020 or 21, President Macron gave an interview, and in his interview, he was asked about the possibility of a European army. And he gave an answer, and he finished his answer with emphasizing the following, that you are not seeing the real problem, because you think that the big problem is the establishment or creation of the European army. The big problem, he said in that time, is what to do with it if we have it. And I think we are over this problem now, because Russia might be identified clearly as a geopolitical enemy of Europe. And that's an important factor. And it, as it has been mentioned, unfortunately, the US is giving signs of withdrawal from the European affairs, especially in the field of defense of Europe. But here we should think that, as it has been described in a Hungarian paper, that Europe has been accommodated for decades in a kind of defense mummy hotel. I mean, it gave the impression to the European leadership that on the international financial market we are ready to finance the deficit of the US budget, and in return Europe is providing a defense for a credible defense for Europe. And I think this situation disappeared step by step in the past decades with the start of the introduction of euro. Because with the introduction of euro as a competitor of the US dollar in financial markets, the situation became different. And as President Trump mentioned many times, they had in America the feeling that they are spending billions on Europe, and in return they receive less and less economic possibilities. And that's the perspective how the internal regulation of the EU, which is very sophisticated and very human rights protective or defending human rights in many sense, for example, in the field of artificial intelligence and other touchy technological issues. Looking at it from the US, it is a big obstacle of economic cooperation, and it is simply a kind of a riddle to stop the Americans' high-tech industry inside the European context. And as it has been mentioned before, unfortunately, we have the very sophisticated regulation on one hand, but unfortunately, we do not have the really developed and capable strategic high-tech industry. And that's really a problem from the point of view of the strategic autonomy of Europe. Well, it has been mentioned that we are in Europe suffering the complex of inferiority, and later it has been added that not simply the complex of inferiority, but also the complex of superiority. I think István Gyarmati highlighted very clearly the point of view of inferiority. As far as the superiority complex, I would like to add only a small remark that a good example is the highly sophisticated protection of environment and the demand in this respect, at least on behalf of the Commission. I think that's really a market disadvantage. We should value of this aspect, and we should pay to attention this, and then we should think over what are the value priorities to have a much better environment, and we intentionally should pay the price for it, or we would like to have a lower protection for human health and the environment and becoming more competitive. And I think, at least according to my impression, Europe is emphasizing both things parallelly, and that's really difficult. It's almost impossible to achieve parallelly the two things. And of course, the civil society of the environmental groups are neglected, or at least they got the impression that they are lagging behind, that they are not important anymore because competitiveness is coming first. And the same feeling is existing in the industry, that they got the impression that we should invest somewhere else, not in Europe, because we are under very difficult musts of the regulation. So that's the other issue I want to mention, and then I would like to reflect to the concept of empire in this respect. And if we are talking about empires, in my eyes, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the basic fabric of empires, at least in the history, was violence. So if there is a peaceful integration, a peaceful unity, that's something new. Maybe we could call it empire, but we should clarify this distinction. And the other related remark is that some years ago there were quite a lot of words on Fortress Europe, the concept of Fortress Europe. And this concept of Fortress Europe was conceived in the time that Europe is closing its doors and not allowing many migrants coming in. But this Fortress Europe might be interpreted differently. This Fortress Europe might be interpreted that way, that Europe is able to protect itself. And I think looking the whole problem, the use of concepts, from this point of view, I think really important that Europe should protect in a way or another to protect itself on its own, at least to give this impression to Russia and the other major political centers of the world. And finally, I would like to say only 2 or 3 words on the legal fabric issue. And I think what is really important here, that although it is clear for everyone that the non-use of force rule has been violated, and national eagerness have been clearly exhibited for territories of other countries, the legal structure is the same. And we have this legal structure as a yardstick to measure how far the states are able to follow those rules which were made by themselves. And that's the real problem, that the US or China or Russia think that we believe in international norms, but at the same time, we are exceptions. We are outside guardians of international legal order, and the world should accept it because that's a common interest for us. And this way of thinking is rather dangerous. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Kardos, for this interesting talk. As we understood so far from the speakers, is that we are understanding that Europe is adapting to these power politics, predatory environment, without really assuming the logic of national great power politics. The next speaker is Dr. Iván Bába, a distinguished Hungarian diplomat, academic, and professor at the University of Public Administration and the Hungarian University of Sports Science, a former ambassador of Hungary to Poland and permanent state secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He brings extensive experience in diplomacy and foreign affairs, as well as a Central European perspective on international relations. He also gave an interesting speech, an interesting lecture a few weeks ago, here about the implication about the changing US posture for Europe. And I'm curious to know from his perspective on how the Trump message was received in Europe. And I think the ambassador mentioned it, that he would like to see fewer boots, American boots on European ground, and also some decisions to withdraw some withdrawal plans for U.S. troops in Germany, and deployment cancellation of 4,000 troops to Poland followed afterwards in this regard. Is Europe ready to take more responsibility for conventional deterrence and lead military command roles right now? So I'm leaving open this question for you, and we are really curious to know your perspective on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to add 2 or 3 short remarks concerning the presentations we have been hearing now. First, I would like to quote a few passages from my paper that was presented here in Kőszeg, and these are the quotations for the National Security Strategy paper of the United States. I think that it was quite challenging for all of us how the present US administration is identifying Europe for the time being, and what are the main priorities of the United States regarding Europe. Let me quote a few of them. First, re-establishing conditions of stability within Europe and strategic stability with Russia, enabling Europe to stand on its own feet and operate as a group of aligned sovereign nations, including by taking primary responsibility for its own defense without being dominated by any other adversarial power, cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations, opening European market to US goods and services, building up the healthy nations of Central, Eastern and Southern Europe through commercial ties, weapons sales, political collaboration, ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance, and encouraging Europe to take action to combat mercantilist overcapacity, technological theft, cyber espionage, and other hostile economic practices. So that these, I think these sentences are not very positive and very friendly concerning Europe from the American view. I would quote another author, and it is a strange but well-known Russian politologist or historian or main advisor of Putin, of President Putin. In his book, the title of it is the Euro-Asian Mission. In this, he gives a new perspective for the world order, where he offers a world order system with 4 components. One is the America, the grand region, the great region of America. The other one, the great region of Western Asia, led by Russia. The third one is the Eastern Asia, led by China. And the fourth one is Europe and Africa, led by Europe. It means that the whole problem of African migration and others are delegated to Europe. Somehow this is the present vision of I think, a very important Russian politologist concerning the new world order system. And he declares quite clearly that these different regions have to live peacefully, have to cooperate, and have to work in order to create a stable world order system. This is one thing that I wanted to turn your attention to, because it's an interesting view. Now, some reflections, mainly to the ideas raised by Ambassador Brix concerning the centralizing Europe, the European Union, the so-called empire. I used to use another term, and it is a federal statehood. It means that the federalization of Europe, it's probably not so provoking as empire, but it might be useful as well, because I fully agree with you that without a well-functioning state-like or statehood as the European Union, Europe or the European Union has never become, well, it will never become an efficient, active pole of the new world order, where the three others, China, Russia, and the United States, are well organized and well centralized powers. And something similar should be achieved in Europe as well. But there are these huge challenges. One is the duality of melting pot effect on one hand, and representing the national interests on the other one. As we know that the smaller nations of Europe are frustrated by the vision of becoming somehow the victims of the melting pot effect in a longer term of history, and that's why protecting national interests is, of course, one of the most important pillars of their activity in the European Union. On the other hand, what is a bit beyond this problem, it is whether the common interests of the European Union and the national interests of countries and nations, how can be brought into a harmony? How could they be harmonized, and which interests are more important, knowing that in some cases the common European interests are needed to be represented in the European decision making, and this should be beyond the national interest of countries, including, of course, the decisive powers of Europe, like Germany or France. The coordination of interest and accepting the fact that in some cases the common interests can be more important, especially in case what was mentioned by Ambassador Gyarmati, that, for example, the whole security question, the defense structure of the European Union, it is, as we know, a very sensitive field. It could be, of course, the next pillar of the European integration, but such issues, for example, as a cooperation in intelligence or surveillance and so on, they are so sensitive that a new approach would be needed to this. And if these problems would be somehow addressed, and some answers could be found in that case, the integration of the European Union could be accelerated, and we could achieve a higher level of structure, a higher level of structural cooperation, which I would call some steps towards this federal statehood. Thank you very much for your attention.